used to believe that loyalty was enough. That if you gave someone your trust, completely, honestly, they would hold it the way you held them at night. I was wrong. The truth is, some people don't break your heart with lies. They break it with silence, with omissions, with half-truths carefully wrapped in comfort and familiarity. My name is Claire. I'm 29. And this isn't just the story of a failing marriage. It's the story of how I let another woman walk into my home, sleep under my roof, sit at my table, and slowly, without even trying, become the center of my husband's world. She was his best friend. That's what he told me. That's what he always told me. And for a long time, I believed him. Because love makes you want to believe. Because no one wants to admit that they're being replaced in real time. That someone else is already living in the space you thought was sacred. But I saw it. In the small things first. The way his voice softened when he said her name. The way he always smiled a little wider when she walked into the room. The way he looked away from me, to find her face in a crowd. And I ignored it. Because I didn't want to be the jealous wife. The insecure one. The woman who couldn't handle her husband having a female friend. I told myself, if you love him, you trust him. If you trust him, you trust her. And that's where I failed. Not because I was weak, but because I refused to see what was right in front of me. Because I chose peace over confrontation. Silence over suspicion. Grace over gut instinct. And what did that give me? A front row seat to the quiet dismantling of my own marriage. And a husband who looked me in the eyes each night, while wishing he'd married someone else. So this is how it started. With a woman he called just a friend. And a version of myself that desperately wanted to believe it. But deep down, I think I always knew. Let me take you back to the beginning. Before the betrayal. Before the silence. Before I watched another woman live the life I thought was mine. Let me tell you what it's like. To become the outsider in your own marriage. Let me tell you how it feels. To be the woman he chose. But never truly wanted. End of opening. Ready to transition into part 1. The woman he chose, and the one he never let go of. People often ask how love begins. For me, it was a joke about stale birthday cake at a party I almost didn't go to. He was charming in that quiet, observant way. The kind of man who didn't speak much. But when he did, he looked you directly in the eye. We talked for hours that night. And I remember thinking, finally, someone who listens. Someone who sees me. Within 6 months, I moved into his apartment. Within a year, we were married. It felt fast. But it also felt right. Until it didn't. He told me early on that he had a best friend from college, Nina. They'd known each other for over a decade. He said she was like family. And I tried to believe him. Because when you're in love, you want to believe that the past won't come back to haunt the present. She was tall, loud, always dressed like she didn't care what people thought. There was something magnetic about her. And something performative too. She never made fun of me directly. But I could feel it. Like a buzzing under my skin. The condescension wrapped in smiles. The snide remarks disguised as jokes. Oh, Claire doesn't watch basketball? Tragic. You don't drink beer? We'll have to fix that. And always followed by a wink. Like she expected me to laugh along. I didn't. But I didn't fight it. Either. Because I didn't want to be the one who couldn't handle their friendship. I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, he chose me, right? He proposed to me. He said I was the woman he wanted a life with. So I pushed the discomfort down. Swallowed it like medicine. Nodded and smiled when he said Nina would be his best man at our wedding. Everyone thought it was cute. Progressive. But I remember standing there. In my white dress. Watching them laugh together during the rehearsal dinner. And feeling like the third wheel at my own engagement. Still, I said nothing. I told myself, this is what maturity looks like. What I didn't realize is, sometimes maturity looks a lot like denial. There were signs. Small ones. But once you see them in hindsight, they feel enormous. Like how she always knew what to order for him. The way she casually referenced things I'd never heard about. Like inside jokes that were never mine to laugh at. Once, I found a photo in an old album. Them in Mexico. Years ago. He never mentioned the trip. She was kissing his cheek. His arm was around her waist. I showed it to him. He shrugged and said it was from forever ago. He didn't even look uncomfortable. And I believed him. Because when you love someone, you learn to gaslight yourself before anyone else has to. The truth is, I wanted to be the cool wife. The chill one. The unbothered one. The one who trusted. I even invited her to lunch once. Just the two of us. We sat across from each other at a cafe downtown. She sipped a black coffee, looked at her nails, and said, "You're sweet. He needs someone like you to balance him out." And I remember thinking, why did that feel more like a warning than a compliment? Even my best friend Elise pulled me aside one day. Said she saw the way Nina looked at him. That it wasn't normal. That it didn't feel like just friendship. But I defended him. Defended them. Because admitting something was off meant admitting I might lose him. And I wasn't ready for that. It's strange how you can live in the same house as someone and not realize they're already somewhere else entirely. That their loyalty isn't where they promised it would be. I thought I was his partner. But slowly, Nina became his compass, his confidant, his comfort zone. And me? I became background noise. Smiling, cooking, waiting for the day he'd finally look at me the way he looked at her. But that day never came. Because the truth is, he never stopped choosing her. Not when he proposed to me. Not when we said our vows. Not even when he slipped a ring on my finger and promised to leave the past behind. She was never the past. She was always there, like a shadow, like a ghost, like a habit he never intended to break. And I was the woman he married. But she was the woman he never let go of. It wasn't until the day she moved into our house, broken, crying, freshly dumped, that I realized just how far he would go to keep her close. And just how much of myself I'd lose, trying to pretend it didn't bother me. That's when things began to unravel. That's when the real story began. To be continued in part 2, when she moved into my home and my marriage. There's a moment in every relationship where something shifts, and nothing ever feels quite the same again. For me, that moment arrived on a rainy Thursday night, when Nina showed up on our doorstep, soaked, shaking, and sobbing like a child who had lost her way. Her boyfriend had left her. Apparently, he found a dating app on her phone. She claimed it meant nothing. That she was just playing around. That it was a joke. A distraction. But all I could think was, what kind of person finds entertainment in pretending to be wanted by strangers while being loved by someone real? Still, she was hurting. And I was trained, like so many women are, to comfort even the people who made me uncomfortable. So I let her in. That night, she stayed on our couch. And my husband, so suddenly and intensely devoted, insisted on staying out there with her. I said I'd join them, even though all I wanted was to be alone. I couldn't bear the thought of them curled up beside each other, even in grief. So I lay on the pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling, while he whispered to her in the dark. And I remember thinking, this doesn't feel like kindness. This feels like the beginning of something I won't be able to stop. She was supposed to leave the next morning. But she didn't. She said she felt too fragile. That she couldn't face her empty apartment alone. And he asked me if she could stay just a little longer. And I said yes. Because when someone you love asks you to be patient, you try, even when your gut is screaming run. 3 days became 5, then a week. Our home began to change. The air felt different, thicker, heavier, like there wasn't enough space to breathe anymore. She started cooking his favorite meals, ones I didn't even know he liked. She wore his old college sweatshirt. The one he said he'd thrown out. I found it one morning, hanging off her shoulder, and I didn't have the strength to ask why. They watched movies together. The old sci-fi films he used to say were too boring for us to finish. Now suddenly, he was quoting every line. They laughed at inside jokes that left me out. They shared silences that felt more intimate than anything I'd had with him in months. And I was becoming invisible. In my own marriage, I tried talking to him once. I waited until she went out for groceries, sat him down, tried to find the words that wouldn't make me sound jealous. Even though I was. I asked him if he thought this, whatever this was fair to me. He looked surprised, almost hurt, and he said, "She needs us right now. Us. Like we were a team. All three of us. Like I hadn't already been edged out of my own partnership." I stopped talking after that. Not because I didn't care, but because it was clear. He no longer listened with the same ears. His attention, his empathy, his loyalty, they all belonged to her now. One night, I came home earlier than usual. The lights were low. Music played softly from the living room speaker. One of her playlists, not mine. Her shoes were by the door. His jacket was on the hook next to hers. And for a second, I stood there in the doorway, wondering if they even noticed I was gone. Wondering if they would notice if I never came back. And the thing that broke me wasn't some grand betrayal. It wasn't catching them in bed. It wasn't a secret kiss or a flirty text. It was this. Watching them laugh together while doing the dishes. Her elbow nudging his head thrown back in a way I hadn't seen in months. That's when I knew. She wasn't a guest anymore. She wasn't healing. She was settling in. They had rewritten the rules of my home. And I had let them. Because I thought being silent was the same as being strong. Because I believed that good wives endure. That jealousy is ugly. That love is about sacrifice. But now I was starting to realize. What I had been calling patience was just self-erasure. And I was running out of pieces to give. I didn't know it then. But something even worse was coming. Something I would hear. Not from a phone call. Not from a message. But from the crack of a bedroom door. And the sound of two voices. Whispering in a space that used to belong to me. To be continued in part 3. What I overheard behind the door changed everything. There are sounds you never forget. The hum of your wedding song. The first time someone you love whispers your name. And then, there are the ones that break you open from the inside. Like the sound of your husband's voice. Low, intimate, speaking to another woman behind a door you didn't know you'd left ajar. It had been 10 days since Nina moved in. By then, I had grown used to the silence between us. To the quiet clicks of shared laughter I wasn't part of. To being invisible in my own home. I came home early that day. A meeting got cancelled. Traffic was lighter than usual. Fate, maybe. Or something crueler. His car was already in the driveway, which was strange. He usually told me when he got home early. But there was no message. No missed call. I walked in, and the house was silent. Too silent. No TV. No music. Just the hum of the fridge and the faint sound of voices. Coming from the bedroom. Our bedroom. The door was almost closed. Almost. And if it had been fully shut, maybe I would have knocked. Maybe I would have walked away. But it was open just enough to let the truth bleed through. And that's when I heard it. His voice. Soft. Sincere. Telling her she deserved better. That this, all of it, was bound to happen eventually. I leaned closer. I don't know what I was hoping to hear. Reassurance? Boundaries? Maybe something like, "You need to stop. I'm married." But what I heard was her saying she wished she'd married him instead. And worse, him agreeing. He said he'd thought about it. That lately, he'd been wondering how different his life would be if she had been the one. And then, almost laughing, he admitted that sometimes, when she was walking around the house, He imagined what it would be like if she were his wife instead of me. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it. Like it was nothing. Like it was some passing thought you share over coffee with an old friend. Not a blade you drive into the back of the woman who trusted you most. They giggled. I remember that part most clearly. The sound of them giggling. Like teenagers. Like what they were doing didn't carry the weight of destruction. Like I wasn't on the other side of the door, listening as my marriage crumbled, quietly. I stepped back. Not out of politeness. Out of survival. Because I knew, if I stood there any longer, I'd either scream or collapse. I walked out of the house. Without saying a word. No confrontation. No tears. No scene. Just the car keys in my hand. The front door left slightly open behind me. And a silence that said more than anything I could have screamed. I drove to a hotel. Checked in using my middle name. Sat on the edge of the bed with my coat still on. And stared at the wall for hours. No crying. No phone calls. Just stillness. Numbness. Like my brain was buffering. Trying to decide whether to break. Or survive. It took 3 days before I could move again. 3 days of ignoring every call. Every knock at the hotel door. Every instinct that told me to go back. To explain. To fix it. But this wasn't mine to fix. This was a betrayal that had been building in plain sight. With inside jokes. Shared glances. Old sweatshirts. And now, whispered regrets. On the 4th day, I got a text. Not from him. From his friend Kyle. One of the groomsmen. Someone I hadn't blocked yet. He said my husband wanted to talk. That he knew I'd overheard the conversation. Because I'd left the door open when I walked out. He said, it was all just words. That my husband didn't mean any of it. He just wanted to make Nina feel better. But here's the thing. You don't make someone feel better by telling them you wish your wife was someone else. You don't comfort an old friend by offering her a fantasy life at the expense of your real one. And that was the moment I stopped hoping he'd come after me. Stopped hoping he'd say the right thing. Because the truth was already loud enough. They didn't see me, but I saw them for who they really were. And the woman I had been. The one who tried to stay calm. Reasonable. Understanding. She died on the other side of that bedroom door. And someone else began to rise in her place. Someone who wasn't going to be quiet anymore. To be continued in part 4, he called it comfort. I called it betrayal. After I left, he tried to tell me it was all just talk. That he was just comforting her. That he didn't mean it. That I shouldn't have taken it so seriously. He called it a mistake. No, not the feelings. Not the imagined life with her. Not the moment he erased me from our marriage in a single breath. No, the mistake, apparently, was that I happened to overhear it. It's always like that, isn't it? When someone hurts you, they don't regret what they said. They regret that you were there to hear it. He sent me texts at first. Long ones. Told me that Nina had left. That he told her it was too much. That he only said what he said to keep her from spiraling. But how do you explain away imagining another life with someone, while your wife is still in the room? Even if it was just comfort. How many times had he imagined it when I wasn't around? How many meals did we share, where he smiled at me, and wished I were her? He called it a slip. I called it betrayal. Because the truth doesn't always come with lipstick on a collar. Sometimes it comes in the form of confessions. Spoken a little too softly. To someone standing a little too close. I sent him one text. Only one. I'm not coming back. I've already left. You just didn't notice. And that was it. I blocked him. His number. His friends. His family. Even his mother. Who once told me, Nina will always be part of his life. Dear. Just accept it. Looking back. Maybe she always knew. I hired a lawyer the next day. His name was Daniel. An old friend of my father's. Kind. Blunt. Efficient. He looked over the details. Asked me if I had any proof. I told him I had words. Memories. A broken sense of trust. He asked if I had anything more concrete. That night, I emailed him the timeline. Screenshots. Every message I'd ever saved. Even the one from Kyle. Even the one from the night I walked out. A few days later, I decided to go back to the house. Just to get my things. My laptop. My clothes. The little pieces of myself that were still trapped in those walls. I picked a time I knew he wouldn't be home, early afternoon. But when I pulled into the driveway, both cars were there, his and hers. I froze. I remember gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. It felt like the earth was laughing in my face. After everything he said, after telling me she was gone, there she was, back again, like nothing ever happened, like I had never existed. I almost turned around, but something in me had shifted. I wasn't the woman who left in silence anymore. I walked in. I didn't say a word. Didn't look at them. I went straight to the bedroom and began packing. Fast. Efficient. Cold. He tried to speak. I held up a hand. I wasn't there for a conversation. I was there for closure. Then Nina appeared at the door. And of course, she had things to say. She always did. She told me she never meant to come between us. That she was just vulnerable. That he asked her to stay. Not the other way around. And then, she said something I'll never forget. I think I might have fallen in love with him, but I was willing to step aside. For you. As if I should thank her. As if her sacrifice was some kind of kindness. That was the moment I realized. Neither of them had any idea what they had done to me. What they had taken. They had turned my home into a fantasy playground for what-ifs. And almosts. And emotional affairs disguised as empathy. They weren't cruel. They were selfish. And selfish people don't see the damage until they're standing in the ruins. Still convinced the fire wasn't that bad. I finished packing in silence. Left without looking back. As I closed the front door, I felt something loosen in my chest. It wasn't peace. Not yet. But it was the first breath of something like it. I moved in with my friend Elise for a while. She made me tea, held me when I broke down, and never once said, "I told you so." Because real friends don't gloat. They hold space. And real love doesn't leave room for doubt. But I wasn't done learning that lesson. Because just when I thought the worst had passed, that the final line had been drawn, he would send me something I never expected. A confession. And a confirmation that everything I feared was real. To be continued in part 5, when the truth was no longer hidden. I thought I'd heard the worst of it. That the soft giggles behind the bedroom door were as far as the betrayal would go. But betrayal doesn't always stop when you walk away. Sometimes it follows you. Quietly. Patiently. Like a shadow that knows where you sleep. A week had passed since I moved out. I'd started working again. Waking up early. Trying to build some kind of routine. Even if my chest still felt like it was caving in each morning. My lawyer had begun drafting divorce documents. We were gathering everything. Texts. Bank records. Shared accounts. Leases. Daniel, my lawyer, asked me again. Do you want to pursue fault-based grounds? Infidelity? I told him I didn't have proof. That all I had were feelings. Implications. And a deep, gnawing certainty in my gut. He said, then we wait. Sometimes, the truth presents itself. I didn't expect it to come so soon. And definitely not in the way it did. It was a Saturday. Cloudy. Damp. Unremarkable. Until I got the email. A strange address. No name. No subject line. Just a blank preview and a familiar sense of dread clawing at my throat. I clicked it. It was from him. He confessed. Said he and Nina had slept together 2 nights ago. Said they'd been drinking. That they were both so sad. That my absence had left a void they didn't know how to sit with. He called it a moment of weakness. But all I read was confirmation. Confirmation that I had been right all along. That I hadn't been paranoid, or oversensitive, or insecure. That every look, every whisper, every shifting silence had been leading to this. He said he didn't want to lie to me anymore. That he knew we were already over. That he hoped I'd find peace. Peace. He hoped I'd find peace. After he took everything from me and handed it to the one person he swore was harmless. I stared at the screen for a long time. Long enough for my hands to go cold. Long enough for the tears to come. Not hot, not loud, just steady. Not because I still loved him, but because this was the death of something deeper. The death of the version of myself who had clung to the belief that if I loved hard enough, quietly enough, selflessly enough, it would be enough. I forwarded the email to my lawyer. No subject line, no explanation. He replied within minutes, "This changes everything." I didn't care. Not in that moment. Because justice might fix paperwork. But it doesn't patch the hole in your chest, left by a love you sacrificed yourself to hold together. I called my father. I didn't even know what I was going to say. I just needed someone to remind me I existed. He picked up on the first ring. And without asking anything, he said, "Where are you?" He and my mom showed up within half an hour. With cake, and soup, and eyes that didn't judge. They didn't try to give me advice. They didn't say, "I told you so." They just sat with me, held my hand, let me cry, and in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not forgiveness, not clarity, but safety. I stayed with them for a few days. Ate real meals, went on walks with my mother, sat in the garden with my dad while he drank coffee and told me about squirrels he'd named. It was ordinary, and in its ordinariness, it felt like healing. But even as the divorce moved forward, as my lawyer gathered evidence, as the house became his, and I moved into a small apartment with light that hit the floor just right at 8 a.m., there was still something missing, something hollow, because the wound wasn't just him. It wasn't even her. It was the part of me that had allowed the disrespect to grow in silence. The part that had watched myself disappear piece by piece, while calling it grace. I had to face that part of me too. Not to blame her, but to bury her with compassion. To say, "You did your best, but now it's my turn." And that's where I began again. Not by moving on, but by moving inward. Because sometimes the person you need to forgive is the one who didn't speak up, the one who stayed too long, the one who gave too much. Sometimes, the real healing begins when you forgive yourself for not knowing what you couldn't yet see. To be continued in Part 6. The end of us was the beginning of me. There's a strange kind of silence that comes after the storm. It's not peace, not at first. It's more like stillness. A quiet that forces you to sit with everything that's broken and decide what, if anything, is worth salvaging. The marriage was over. The lies were exposed. The documents were filed. There was no more pretending. No more waiting for apologies that wouldn't change anything. I moved into a small apartment 2 weeks after the email. Furnished. Minimal. Quiet. Just me. A few suitcases. A teapot I stole from the old kitchen. And the echo of a woman I no longer recognized in the mirror. Elise helped me move in. She brought a bottle of wine, a playlist from college, and the kind of irreverent humor that made pain feel lighter. If only for an hour. We unpacked in silence, not because we didn't have anything to say, but because she knew I was learning how to breathe again. And some things can only happen in silence. That night, I sat by the window and watched the city breathe without me. And for the first time in a long time, I let the grief in. Not the kind that demands answers. Not the kind that begs someone to come back. No, the quiet kind. The grief that lets you mourn. Not just what you lost, but who you were while losing it. I missed her. The woman who believed, who tried, who forgave too easily and stayed too long. I missed her, but I didn't want to be her anymore. Because love that demands your disappearance is not love, it's erasure. And I was done disappearing. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday. A gray envelope, a single signature, a quiet ending to something that once felt like a forever. He didn't contest anything. No letters, no arguments, not even a final phone call. Just silence, which somehow hurt more than any screaming ever could. But it was also a gift. Because sometimes, the lack of closure is the closure. Weeks passed. I got back to my work. Started journaling again. Tried yoga, hated it. Tried therapy, kept going. I went to a small retreat Elise recommended, just 2 days. A cabin in the woods. No cell service. Just women, most of them heartbroken in one way or another. We sat in circles and shared stories. Cried, laughed, broke open, and began stitching ourselves back together. In ways the world never teaches us. One woman, maybe in her 60s, said something that stayed with me. She said, I spent half my life waiting to be chosen. The other half learning I didn't have to be. I think about that a lot now. About how I used to beg for crumbs. When I was always worthy of the whole damn feast. I don't hate him anymore. Not really. Because he showed me the cost of self-abandonment. And that's a lesson I'll never unlearn. As for Nina, I don't think about her much. She wasn't the villain. She was the mirror, reflecting all the places where I had left myself behind. Healing didn't come in a grand moment. No sweeping triumph. No big, aha, scene. It came slowly, quietly, in the way I now cook breakfast for one. With music on and no one to impress. In the way I sit by my window at 6 p.m. watching the sky fade, knowing no one is coming home. And being okay with that. It came in choosing myself. Day after day, even when I still missed him. Even when I missed the idea of him. Because some people aren't meant to stay. They're meant to wake you up. And once you're awake, you don't go back to sleep. So here's the truth. He didn't ruin me. He revealed me. And the end of us? It wasn't a failure. It was an invitation. To finally meet myself. End of story. If you've made it all the way to the end, thank you. These stories aren't always easy to tell. And maybe, they're not always easy to hear either. But if something in this story spoke to you, even just a little, I'd love to know. Feel free to leave a comment. Share your thoughts. Or just let me know you were here. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, or share this video with someone who might need it. Every little bit helps this channel grow. And helps these voices be heard. Until next time, take care of your heart. It's the only one you've got.